Recording started.
Alrighty. Yeah. This video's not very flattering. I look like Bruce Jenner. But anyway, moving on. So, a couple quick things before we get started. I loaded the videos that you probably will be able to see by this point. And what's a video assignment? Okay, so the way we're going to do, I just saw a comment from somebody about the video comments. The video comments are not such a big deal. It's not like a huge graded assignment. I mean, it's graded, but I think 1 point is what I've assigned to it. So it's more of the participation part of that. So don't get too wrapped up about it. But yeah, you will go in there in the assignment section because I need someplace to put it. That's where the video comments are. So you'll watch the videos. Now, some of the videos I need to go through more of an explanation with them because some of them are better than others. Like the Hard Rock one last week, where they are talking about pricing and forecasting and stuff like that. It's just kind of goofy. I mean, it's obvious why they are not, the big company that say Disney or somebody like that is. But anyway, this week's videos, there's a couple. There's one on Regal Marine. They talk a bit about product design, and then there's a second one about Ritz-Carlton on quality. It's actually pretty good. The content of the video is not bad, but the problem with it is it kind of reinforces the misconception that quality is the most expensive, the most whatever product. The sense of quality that we're talking about in operations management is the analysis of process so that product is delivered as efficiently as possible. There's another question, is it an assignment? In the sense of counting for your participation grade, yeah, it is an assignment. But it's not quite like the homework type thing. Video content will not be, this video is killing me. I look like a whatever. Fix that. So anyway, the video, the videos that you'll watch are just kind of for educational purposes in terms of amplifying some of the points we'll talk about in class. The actual homework assignments are a bit more critical. And don't worry, I mean, some people have had some questions on them, and I am going to send out the actual correct answers to those homework problems. I want you to attempt them on your own, but the way that we're trying to bring some more calculations and some of those type of things, more of the quantitative type stuff into the class, is that some of those, a selected number of those homework problems will show up in terms of the exams. So on the exams, it's going to be multiple choice, true, false for the most part, but there will be some of those problems will show up, but they'll be very close to the problems assigned on the homework. So if you can do the homework problems, then you can pretty much be assured that you're in good shape for that. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about, if we can get this thing to go, some of the cleanup items, forecasting. Again, when we talk about qualitative and quantitative data, qualitative is the sort of the touchy-feely stuff, the material that you get more or less from intuition and experience, and then the quantitative is data that's related to a lot of times statistical information or past sales data, and it's more something that you're going to calculate. And so when you're talking forecasting, though, you don't want to use either one exclusively. What you want is some sort of combination. You want to obviously analyze the previous sales data that you had available, but then you want to go ahead and use some judgment. And that judgment, like I said last week, might be, if the competition, if you're selling snow machines and the competition has just come out with new models that are far superior to yours, and you're selling the old stuff, you might imagine that your sales are probably going to slump a little bit compared to the other guys. So anyway, it's things like that. That would be qualitative data that you would catch, and the quantitative, the way you'd come up with that analysis. And in the case of snow machines, you'd be looking back on previous years, how you did, and percentages and numbers that may influence those outcomes. Other things, sometimes, this Laffer curve thing, this was a relationship. This was actually something I may not have gone into in the lecture, but when we start talking about taxes and other things, people sometimes are under the impression that you can raise taxes to sort of an infinite amount, that taxes and taxing people respond in a linear fashion, and that's not always the case. You can make a tax rate high enough to where you essentially stop that activity. So we'll talk more about this in other situations, but it does come into almost every aspect of operations management, because so much of manufacturing and so much of the service industry, the producers are influenced by the tax rates they pay. And this guy Art Laffer came up with this stuff way back when, but it's kind of common sense. Another thing I talked about too, and this may not have addressed to everybody in the class, but sometimes some of the studies, and people will say this or that, regarding the that there's a new research study posted on something, and just to show you how bad or obscure things can get, there are actually studies that polls and research that said that water cannot prevent dehydration, which is pretty absurd. So anyway, we're kind of getting off on a tangent on that, but those are just some of the things we talked about. And then the last thing that I mentioned was in the project management, again, getting back to the video where Arnold Palmer, hospital, they're trying to build this hospital, and it's just not very realistic. Most projects in general are much, much more complex, and it's all about organization. I'm not sure, I tried to stress that last week, but it may not have come across that like it or not, project management is kind of taken for granted by most managers. Most people, in terms of your superiors, look at project management and think, oh, that's not that difficult, but they may not have much empathy for you and remembering the difficulties involved. So that's why you need to be very, very organized, and make it look as easy as others think it is. And we know it's more complex, but again, with software, with being very organized, you can overcome that. So again, we're getting off to kind of a scattered start, but a couple things I just wanted to clean up. And the critical path analysis chart, here's the example that I had from last week. Again, the critical path analysis, if you are having trouble trying to figure that out, this little decoder ring up here that that I talk about, that will be on the exam. So it's not so much a memorization tool. In fact, if you notice when I'm doing these charts, I usually leave off latest start and latest finish, because it just kind of makes the chart more cluttered than it needs to be, and you could always calculate them if you wanted to. You're more concerned with earliest start, earliest finish, and you work your way on through the chart. So product design or product decision, as we talked about last week, or at least I mentioned, this is critical. Life can be very hard if you're manufacturing something that's not in demand. And, the only real opinion that matters out there is that of the customer. So, if you're trying to sell something that's not being pulled from the market by customer demand, life is going to be tough. The other thing about product design and product decision is that it's very transitory. You need to very often be updating the product mix. I've talked about some of the companies like 3M and some of the other companies that by design, by one of their metrics for their managers, they require a certain amount of new products amongst their mix because they realize that that's just the nature of consumers. Consumers want something new each time. I keep trying to up this volume to see if it'll stick. But anyway, so the product decision is a continual process. Coming up with that next product. The Regal Marine video, it's there in the materials section. Again, those things will not play in this video, but you can watch them on your own time. But it covers some of the highlights from the book. So here's this product life cycle that I'm talking about. Now, again, this will impact in forecasting decisions, because forecasting is where you try and set out this curve. Now, that obviously the forecast is not going to match reality perfectly, but you should try as best as possible, because once you're actually in the product production phase, you may be too late for you to increase the production significantly enough or decrease it to manage the production process. So if you get your forecast screwed up, you could be in a situation where you've got underproduction just at the time when demand is peaking. And alternatively, if you forecasted too high, you could also have excess production. You could be selling a profitable product, but because you have so much overhead from having so much excess capacity, you can set yourself up for failure. But anyway, what they're trying to show here is that, obviously it's negative cash flow initially when you're in development, and then when there's this window of it being in positive cash flow, you need to take advantage of that, because in the not too distant future, you're going to be in a cost control situation because the sales are going to be declining. And you can do what you want, but you're kind of pumping money into a dead product at that point. So depending on the nature of the product, if it's some sort of high-tech product, it may never come back. If it's something else, let's say it's I don't know, the Crocs are going to come back, but maybe Levi's or something. I know there's up and down swings on certain products where they they have sort of a cycle or a fad type element to them. So product life cycle in detail. So introductory phase, a lot of these things are pretty costly. Research, product development, supplier development. You're not really making any money here. You're bringing in the product. The growth phase, things are stabilizing. Effective forecasting becomes necessary. But again, if you didn't do the forecast initially, when you're actually in the growth phase, that's kind of a tough time to be. There's certain things you can't be doing, like building new buildings or even bringing on new staff may be counterproductive at this point, because you're going to have to train them and the rest of that, so they're going to be kind of a net loss. So adding or enhancing capacity, possibly subcontracting, possibly doing something like that. But the problem with subcontractors, somebody else who's going to build the product for you, basically, is what makes a good subcontractor also makes them an excellent competitor, an unwelcome competitor in the process. So if somebody is out there and they have to be able to produce the product to the same specification as you are, or at least as good, if not better, they also have to be able to do it, for a reasonable price. And what in actuality may happen here is you may, bring these people in as a subcontractor, and they may say, cut out the middleman, we'll sell direct, and we're going to jump in that business as well. And they'll already have the skills at producing it, so they won't even have a learning curve. we'll talk about learning curves later, but these guys will be up to speed. They'll know how to produce the product. They'll have a pretty good one up on you if they decide to enter that phase. Maturity phase. So competitors are now established. You probably had a lead on them. You may be able to do things for less cost because you got in there early. You've understand the process. You understand the marketing. You've got a head start on all these folks. But again, this is not the time to be dumping a whole bunch of money into it because maturity phase is quickly followed by decline phase. So at this point, this is the time to cut back on further investments, look at cost control, and just kind of ride this thing out. But do not dump a bunch more money into it in most cases. So sales of new products. So this is just kind of a subjective chart here, but the numbers are fairly valid. Industry leaders, 50% of the new products, and then the bottom feeders down there at the end, the bottom third, very little of it is new product. They're just kind of riding things out, and companies that don't come out with new products, they tend to go away after a certain time. There's other ways to do it. And again, Disney is a very well-run, very profitable company. Obviously, if you've got something like Disneyland, Disney World, it's been around for a long time, and you wouldn't want to shut it down. The Magic Kingdom is kind of their bread and butter, the main attraction there. So making it bigger, it's kind of they've kind of maxed that out, but they might add other things, which they've done. So the Animal Kingdom, the Disney Hollywood, and especially down in Orlando, for example. And I guess they've got this in California as well. But anyway, you've got these other Universal Studios type theme parks, and they'll the Disney Hollywood is essentially direct competition with them, plus the convenience of being right there at the other parks. Plus, if you've been to, Disney World, Disneyland, their quality and their just the way things run, it's pretty attuned to what customers want. You go to some of those other theme parks and they're a little sketchy. So anyway, it's a great idea, and it's again getting back to the Disneyland idea. Say in Orlando. Orlando is not necessarily in the center of the country, not like, anyway, people who go to Orlando, they're either going to fly or drive, and they're going to be there for more than just a few days. And so rather than have people hang out there and go to other places, they can make the Disney experience itself a week-long experience, which is much, better for the bottom line than just having a Magic Kingdom that, after 2 days you're done with it and you're going to go to some other park. Well, with the Disney model, you can stay right there. So anyway, product development. The way this works, it's pretty tough to come up with new products and have this creativity. There are some people who are very good at it, and if they are, you definitely want to harness them. You don't want to, this is critical to the future of the company. But again, if those new ideas aren't flowing in, and if you aren't seeing the creativity, then something needs to be done. Obviously there's the people that are few and far between, kind of the Steve Jobs kind of people that know what the customer wants before they even want it. But for most companies, it's not quite that easy. They have to know what the customers want. They also have to know what the technology is to know kind of what's in the realm of the possible. But anyway, you follow it on down through, and customer requirements, functional specifications, and the rest of it, kind of the engineering feature, and then down to the introduction and the evaluation. But one of the concepts in product development is that you want to make sure that the people that come up with the ideas are able to sort of follow that idea through to production. Because if you sometimes have people that generate the ideas and then it gets into production, and the actual finished product may not look at all like what the designers had envisioned or what they had done the research to find the customer wanted. So sometimes they call that a champion, a person who will be involved with the process and follow that product from the idea stage all the way through to the introduction stage. So we'll talk more about that in a second. So the way it's been done, you can't have the distinct departments. That does put a pretty tough burden on those people that are in that product development department, because it's tough to be creative over and over again. Again, if you've got somebody who is, then yeah, definitely harness them. But for most firms, it's going to be more of a collaborative process with some new people coming in. The champion, that's what I was talking about, where you have somebody who follows that product from development all the way through production. And again, that's probably the best way to do it. Team approach, cross-functional teams, product development teams. So again, you take the burden off of just one person. But again, if you get involved in a committee for development, sometimes you end up with compromises and lack creativity. So if you are going to use some sort of team for development, you need to make sure that there's the whole group thing is minimized, and that you don't end up with just compromised products. The Japanese whole organization approach, again, this is more like the quality type approach. The Japanese were the first ones to implement it, the first one to implement Danning's ideas, but it really does come down to the whole organization. Good ideas may come from anywhere in the firm, and to not empower employees and to not take advantage of good ideas, regardless of where those ideas originate, is foolish. So most firms will try to look for ideas throughout the whole organization, and we'll talk more about it. But one of the this all gets back to quality, which we'll talk about in the second half here. And quality, there's basically Kaizen type things where you have suggestion type boxes and suggestion implementation processes throughout the entire factory, throughout the whole organization, so that you capture ideas and creativity from any level within the organization. So issues for product development. We'll run through these one by one. Some of them are, buzzwords, and some of them are actually principles. The notion of robust design, small variations do not adversely affect the product, typically results in lower cost, lower quality. What they're saying are, there's certain designs, certain things that are manufactured need to be very precise. Diesel fuel injectors, they have to be manufactured out to the millionths, and the tolerances are incredible. But for most things, they don't need to be like that. And so by not over specifying and not over making designs overly complex, you can make your process much easier. And then there's certain things that are just the designs are just intrinsically robust, where, let's say, like a carabiner, like when they use in climbing. If you look at it, just the simple locking device there, and a carabiner that I think most of you are probably familiar with. There's not a whole lot of way to improve upon that. It's a fairly simple design. It's rugged, and it's fairly easy to manufacture, and the rest of that. So something like that that's a simple yet efficient design is evidence of a robust design. Modular design. The example I always use, and people always laugh and give me grief about it, but Mexican food, for example, You got rice, beans, whatever. You mix it up one way and it's a taco. You put it another way, it's a burrito. It's different pieces and parts, and the way they're combined, you end up with different products. And you do the same thing with manufacturing. When you're putting a vehicle together, there's many times different components, and assembled one way, it'll yield a certain vehicle type. Assembled a different way, a different vehicle type. But yet the components are not that distinctly different from one another. It's just the method that they're combined together yields the different product. Computer-aided design. This is probably the worst photo possible to explain computer design, because this is exactly what computer design, this is kind of the reverse. What you do is you put the design in the computer, and with the 3D printer, it spits out the model. You do not get the model and then put it into the computer. But anyway, computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing, automated processes like this are the heart of quality in terms of continuous improvement. People back in the days they used to build Model Ts and other things, they were very limited on what they could do in terms of new ideas, new designs, because it was very difficult. You had draftsmen involved. You had modelers who had to do things. You had huge, costs and delays in production when you made subtle changes. And then you had this very antiquated, paper trail that would follow any change. Well, now with a computer, you can make those changes on the fly, and sorry if you're a draftsman or a modeler, but you're out of work because they're not needed. The designs can be done very quickly. And then you combine this with very low inventory levels by using just-in-time processes, and that means that you don't have a whole warehouse full of the old parts. You can change the design and you can implement it, within the next day, next model, whatever. And you can change the software. You don't have to shut down the equipment and retool. There's no reconfiguring of machines necessarily. A lot of times you go from computer-aided design to computer-aided manufacturing. So you just change the software configuration and you're off to the new product. So it's very powerful. Computer-aided manufacturing. Again, the fact that these guys are still using CAD/CAM is, again, that's getting dated, because now it's just, automated manufacturing or just manufacturing. It's just the way things are done. The resurgence of the car industry, especially in the southern U.S., all those factories are more or less completely automated. And so, there's still workers there, but they're better jobs. They're fewer, but they're higher skilled. They're software people. They're people to work on the machinery themselves. But it's really the only way that manufacturing can return to countries that are industrialized, because the labor costs are not as significant, because there's not as many laborers. There's not as many people doing the work. So the pendulum swings back a bit from some of these countries that can pay their people $5 a day. Well, if you don't have that many people doing manual labor, it makes the higher wage countries again come back into the competitive realm, because you need skilled workers, but just fewer numbers of them. Documents for production. So again, this is what I was talking about when we're talking about the process involved with continuous improvement that would slow improvement or changes down, because a lot of these documents need to be redone every time there's a new product. And now a lot of these documents may only exist electronically. They're easy to change, and if somebody needs some sort of report, they just will generate it from the database that's already out there, the software. So some of these things, there will still be an assembly drawing someplace, but again, it's not like you had to have a draftsman draw this and do the sample assembly and all this. A lot of times this can be done virtually, And also by doing this, you can also do very precise cost estimates and other estimates in terms of the time for the process to be completed. You can do it all electronically, so it's a huge improvement. Assembly charts, how things are going to go together again, but in a different format. Routing sheets, again assigning times and what equipment is going to be used to put the equipment together. Again, these are all these used to exist in paper copies. Work orders, actually tasking of people and equipment, and then the change notices. You get to something like an aircraft or some sort of critical application. These are a huge problem, because when things go wrong and they have to trace back and find out exactly what configuration that airplane or even a vehicle, if there's a recall type thing, it's very critical to keep track of changes that are done within the production process. So that was a little bit on product design. We'll talk more about it as we go, but it's critical. So managing quality, this is the next section, the next chapter, and really, things we'll talk about here in the next half hour or so are critical. Everything, in terms of, process refinement and process improvement is all captured in quality. So operator manager's objective is build TQM that identifies and satisfies the customer's needs. So TQM itself is kind of a total quality management is a buzzword, and it's been misimplemented by many folks. But people who understand it, people who think quality is some sort of revolutionary concept are probably people who lacked common sense. I mean, if you're building something that's not oriented towards the customer, then you probably shouldn't have been building anything in the first place. For most people, when they look at the principles of TQM, they just realize, that's the way things always should have been done. And the managers from years and years ago would have implemented these methods sooner, but they were limited by the technology. There's certain things you could not do in terms of computer-aided manufacturing and some of the ability to order things online and ability to do very efficient production processes were not available until we had the advent of computers and the rest of it. The Ritz-Carlton hotel video, pretty good, except there's a couple things I would take away. It is important that people within the organization know what the mission and the rest of that stuff is with the company. But if you look at the video, it's like a Stepford Wives thing where they just repeat this stuff, and they're maybe might not actually understand the concepts behind it. But there are some good aspects to the video. Some of the parts about the explanations of what variations are and what defects are. The way those terms are used is something that may be unique to quality, just like we use quality in a different sense of the word. Defects and variations and wastes are used probably in ways that you haven't heard them used before. But basically, waste is anything that is not demanded by the customer. If it doesn't have value added for the customer, then that's could be identified as waste. And a defect, correspondingly, is anything that's not designed in correspondence with what the customer wanted. So, waste, obviously things, falling on the floor or being thrown away, that's waste in the traditional sense, but it's also waste in the fact of it's going to make that process less efficient, and it's going to make the ultimate products to the customer more expensive. So therefore, yeah, it's some waste in the sense of quality as well. But we'll talk more about that as we go. Ways quality improves profitability. There's many things that happen in quality that make the company, more efficient and more responsive to the customer. So some of the things that enables the company to do is, sales gain, improved response, flexible pricing, improved reputation. Part of the thing with quality is you want to have a very low defect rate. And that means that any product that leaves the factory, the defect rate should be quite low, because companies very often, almost always, underestimate the cost of rework and warranty type service and repair and the rest of that. Not only does it damage the company's reputation, but it's very costly when, the supply chain is designed to move forward from, the company to the customer. And when things go in reverse, it's incredibly inefficient. And then other reduced cost, increased productivity, lower rework and scrap, which we just talked about, and lower warranty costs. And so, when something goes back in for warranty, not only is there a direct, cash expense, but there's also, the image of the company and the rest of that goes along with it. So when we're talking low defect rates, we get into one of the concepts of, say, Six Sigma, and that means 6 standard deviations, which would be 3.4 defects per million is all that's allowable. You obviously want it less, but 3.4 defects per million is the minimum that you're shooting for to be labeled a Six Sigma type company. Flow of activities. So again, you do need the leadership needs to buy into it, and they will develop a mission statement and the rest of that. But it's important not only to have those things, but it's also to show that the organization itself is focused on it. The principles, the customer focus is obviously at the heart of quality. Continuous improvement, we talked about a little bit. That's where products are made better continually. Benchmarking is kind of a unique, maybe unique quality term. I mean, you've probably heard the concept before, but basically what you do is you look at a process, and it may be your company doing it or another company, but you look at the leader, the people that do it the best within that whole segment, and they become the benchmark, and your plan is to model your process after their benchmark, or perhaps even improve upon it. But you kind of put the competition aside, and you look at how they do it, and if we don't have a better idea, maybe we should be doing it like them, and hopefully come up with some ways to improve it. Just in time in terms of inventory and other things. Anytime you have product in inventory, most of the time it's financed, it's being stored, you're paying for that. It's being stolen out from under you, there's shrinkage, pilferage, whatever you want to call it. And then there's obsolescence. Most products are, the designs are getting stale. The other thing about that is it's very tough, like I said, to do continuous improvement when you've got warehouses full of parts that are the old style. So you want to be very lean with a very agile supply chain so that you can take advantage of new products as they come in. Tools of TQM, we'll talk more about that later. Employee fulfillment, regardless of whether you're sincere or not about it, making your employees feel like they're important is critical. Now, obviously, if you're smart, you will realize their capability. For example, if you've got somebody out there, making parts, they probably know a lot about the ins and outs of those particular parts and probably ways to improve them. And if you would simply take the time to ask them you might get that feedback, which would feed back into the continuous improvement. And then also, it benefits the employee too. The employee, if he's working for a successful company, obviously he's got a bit more job security and he's more committed to that customer. Customer satisfaction, winning orders, repeat customers. But more than that, it's more that the customer is seeing the product that he wanted. If you're, say you're trying to sell Chevy Volts or something like a Chevy, that is a push concept. I've seen one or two on campus and over the years, but compared to say like a Prius is maybe getting a little stale now, but they both came out about the same time, and people were waiting in line and pulling to get Priuses, whereas Chevy Volts were being pushed upon customers, and obviously, the customers got the final vote, so they didn't sell very many of those cars. So anyway, what you want is a product that's in line with what the customer wants, and that's going to be where the satisfaction is going to originate. So I've talked about Deming, Juran's in there, Cosby, Feigenbaum, but anyway, Deming's kind of the main guy. If you're going to read a book on quality, it would be helpful to go back and look at his stuff. But like I've said before, it ought to just be a reaffirmation of kind of common sense to you. If you read the book and you're like, wow, I never thought about this before, I hate to say it, but wow, you thinking about what the customer wants, thinking about all these other attributes, the 14 points of management, they ought to be, that makes sense, and you would understand. TQM, so we've kind of beat continuous improvement, and again, that's enabled by technology. People back when they're making Model Ts, if they saw some way to change it, they would have changed it right then, but they couldn't afford to. The production line's running, retooling expenses, they're not going to shut things down, so it's only with the advent of computers and the advent of CAD CAM and precision manufacturing that they've been able to implement that. Six Sigma, so that directly relates to what I was talking about. The calculation for this is 3.4 defects per million. So that's why it's an extremely low defect rate, which is important. It's especially important if you're making a vehicle or something that's going to have a whole bunch of components, because the more components you put in an assembly, the more likelier probability. And we'll talk about this in maintenance aspects, but you need to have very, very high probability that final product's going to work, and that's done by having very low defect rates amongst the components that it's assembled from. Employee empowerment, so smart for a lot of reasons, but from a quality sense, so that you can get their input, so that you have their buy-in, and you're trying to improve the process throughout quality, and the people who know the process best are not the manager who runs out there and looks at it for half an hour. It's more the people that have been working it for a long, long time. Benchmarking, picking the best process within that industry, within that sector, and trying to emulate it or even improve upon it eventually. Just in time, so just in time inventory, just in time production, it all has to do with a very agile supply chain. Taguchi concepts, we'll talk a few more about that. Again, don't get wrapped up. I mean, it's not all Japanese type stuff. It's back to Deming's ideas and knowledge of some of the tools you can use. So, ISO 9000 and 14000. Again, I lived in Europe for a long, long time. 12, 14 years, something like that altogether. And some of these things were implemented for the wrong reason. I mean, they claim to be, we're very concerned with quality and we're concerned with the environment, but really they were more concerned with being able to maintain their 30-hour work week and saying that, parts that came from other places were inferior. So, they were rooted in quality principles, but the actual implementation, smacked of protectionism, at least in my mind. But anyway, you'll still see in the ISO process. I don't mean to throw out the whole ISO thing, but the 14,000 especially was kind of whatever. But some of the better firms, that implemented quality, we'll go through the ISO process, but just make sure it's implemented for the right reasons. So yeah, the environmental management, auditing, performance. Those were some aspects of it, and not all of it was bad, but some aspects of it were, trying to say that products that say are made in, China or Taiwan or whatever, they're non-compliant and they can't be sold here. Well, isn't that convenient? So, positive public image, compliance, protection of multiple audits. I mean, there's good and bad elements to all of the ISO standards, but you will see ISO certifications in regards to quality manufacturing. Continuous improvement. So again, we've talked about this, but it can be in anything, the people, the equipment, the materials, and the procedures. So, and many times it's the procedures, it's the looking at the process, how things are done. Why does it take 2 weeks to build something? You go back and you look at it, you do a time study, and you see that things are sitting in a queue, sitting in a line, things are being moved needlessly from one part of the country to the other. In a factory like, let's say, like a Toyota plant, the factory itself will have the manufacturers. Well, the Toyota plant will be in the center, and then the vendors will be on the outside, on the periphery of that facility. So there's no transit time. So, because transit is waste. When something's moving cross country, it's essentially in inventory, which is not a good thing, as we said. Six Sigma. So, the key thing. I mean, we're not going to go all these digits, but yeah, that's a very low defect rate and 3.4 defects per million. It's kind of a key thing because you'll see people, I'm Six Sigma rated. They'll talk about being Lean Six, but they won't even really know the concept of what it's referring to, what the Six Sigma is, and its 6 standard deviations. Anyway, but the second meaning is, the low defect rate, lower cost, and improved customer satisfaction, because the customer's much more likely to get a product that operates as advertised. So there it is graphically. So 6 standard deviations, 6 Sigma, right there. So enough said. Employee empowerment. Again, treating your employees like dirt is not smart for a number of reasons, and one of the primary ones is that they can help you out, or they can also be your enemy. If you've got a maintenance program where when equipment breaks and everybody gets to take a break, they get a half an hour off, guess what? You're going to find things breaking all the time. So incentivizing people to have a stake in the process is a good idea. Let me see. Benchmarking. Yep. Best practices, determine what to benchmark team, take actions to exceed the benchmark. So again, this whole benchmarking notion is just a concept of finding out the best process out there and going with it. Resolving customer complaints. This bit about it being free market research is actually true. I mean, customers that complain are often, at least they're taking the time to complain, and they may have a valid complaint that you might be able to address quickly and fix. So, anyway, ignoring it is not going to be helpful, and looking at it as just a cost is not helpful either. I mean, there is some, like we say, some market research that's available out there, so it pays to address things properly. we've all ordered things from different companies, and the companies that don't take care of their customer complaints are ones that are avoided. Whereas some, you may be mildly enthusiastic about the product, but then you return something and they, are very, very good about it, and then they've won a customer for life. So, tools of TQM: check sheets, scatter diagrams, cause and effect, parameter charts, flow charts. So all these things are useful. Don't get too wrapped up about the names. I mean, some of these things are pretty common sense, and you can use your own mechanisms. Histograms, just bar charts, and SPC charts, statistical process control charts. So we'll talk more about these. So a check sheet, this is not rocket science here. You got a number of defects happening, but now you just take the time and you just look to see when these defects occur. And here you can see that, wow, people are a little slow getting started in the morning, hour one, all kinds of defects. All kinds of defects in the late afternoon. So what is going on in terms of, what part of that process needs to be sort of scrutinized and find out what's causing those defects. So when it's just a starting point. It just gives you an indication that, yeah, these defects seem to be aligned with time. And, that would be one aspect. This one is kind of a joke. Again, they're just plotting these things out, but go figure. I don't think we needed to make a chart to figure out that productivity goes up as absenteeism goes down. But again, if that's what it takes. But, you might find more useful, things to graph out here. But anyway, the notion of just taking individual values and plotting them out can be useful, again, for process analysis. Cause and effect diagrams. This has to do with, again, process analyzation, where in this case they're throwing the ball through the hoop, doing free throws, and for some reason that's not happening. So what's the problem? Is it the ball? The material? Is it the method? How the thing's being shot? The machine? The actual mechanical hoop and backport? Or the dude? The manpower? The shooter? So you go back through and rather than just say, yeah, for some reason the ball's only going through the hoop 50% of the time, if you go back through a chart like this, you might be able to figure out, what the cause and the effect is, just like it says. More of that cause and effect diagram. Histogram. So again, sounds easier to just say bar chart, but it's not as academic. So we'll go with histogram. But anyway, here they're just looking at the repair time in minutes, distribution. Again, how useful though is this is just telling you an average repair time, but I don't know that I would want a shorter repair time if it's indeed repaired. I would want it to be lower and lower time in minutes. So you've got to look at the usefulness of the information you're trying to plot. And this is a SPC chart. So we looked at this last week. We'll look at a Frito-Lay example in one of these weeks, and it's actually a pretty good video. I'll put that one out there for you. But what you're doing there is you've got your target value there going in the center, and then you've got the individual values, and then times marching across here. So not bad, even better. Something's going on here. And now we've got a trend going the other way, and then right out, so we're out of control. And then somehow we got back. Anyway, the machine should not be operating like this. You should have, some variation, but it should not be going outside of the control limits. So there's certain rules we'll apply for that, statistical rules, and we'll talk more about that. Flow charts, again, a way to kind of break down the process. Here they're doing MRIs, and they're looking at each step of the process, and you might also look at the times taken, to figure out when they say, it takes 4 hours, find out where sort of the bottleneck is, what's taking more time. In this case, you're showing this basically rework type thing. If unsatisfactory, repeat. Maybe that's an acceptable figure. I don't know the complexity of MRIs given this process. They don't present you with enough information, but 20% rework sounds maybe excessive, but anyway, you'd have to analyze a process. But with the help of a chart like this, at least you can at least put it down, and now you can start doing that analysis. Did we go backwards? SBC chart, we did that. So one of the problems with the video was being the Ritz-Carlton. Ritz-Carlton is going to confuse you because, you know, they are very high quality in both senses of the word. They are very process focused to make sure they employ quality means, but they're also very high priced in terms of quality. And so for this example, they use Nordstrom's, which is exactly kind of the same thing. And a better evaluation might be like La Quinta, you know, like a cheaper hotel, or maybe even like a Target, you know. I don't know if Target's as popular as they once were, especially after their credit deal. But anyway, they seem to be pretty well run. And, you know, in terms of quality processes, you know, they delivered the product at the price that was important to the customer, which is an element of quality. You know, that's what the customer's expectation was. So don't confuse quality with being the highest priced product is what I'm trying to say. And so that's why it's unfortunate they do Nordstrom's here again, whose Nordstrom has a reputation for being, you know, fairly high in price as well. In services, the same sort of thing. So obviously that's what, you know, somebody like Nordstrom's is in the business of doing. And there's even more pressure on services because there's a lot of services that can be automated. You know, you can make your airline reservations online quite easily. So if you are a travel agent, you're going to have to, you know, have some value added in terms of the customer, something they can't get from doing it themselves on the computer. So, you know, you'd have to analyze your process and find out, you know, if you can extend your ability to stay in that field by delivering something more than what the customer's looking for. This thing, again, this gives me kind of the impression that the authors may not fully understand, you know, quality in the sense of the process. But there's one element in here that definitely, you know, highlights quality from the sense of process analysis. So all the stuff about hair and sideburns and whether you're smoking, you know, is that important, a beard or whatever. But this thing right here, tuning the horn, I mean, that would highlight sort of process analysis. If you put, you know, UPS guys are, you know, they make their money, the company makes their money by satisfying the customer at a reasonable price and by delivering their service efficiently. So, you know, you will see UPS drivers do all sorts of things. You know, they never really park, not legally anyway. They make primarily right turns because it's quicker. They do all sorts of things to speed up their route. You know, they've employed whatever technology they can to make that process quicker and bar scans and the rest of it. And when it gets right down to it, though, the tooting of the horn, if you know, most businesses, for example, will have one person who will sign off or accept deliveries and the rest of that. If this guy happens to toot his horn before he, you know, goes up to the door of the business or whatever, it sort of puts people in the right mindset in terms of they're expecting this guy to come barging through the door at any second now, so they're sort of prepped to, you know, sign the paperwork, get the package, and he's on his way. So that, in terms of a quality aspect, attribute is pretty important because it's a win-win. The customer, you know, they get their product quicker, and that person who may be off doing other tasks within inside the building, if they're the person, they hear that horn, they know the UPS guy's there. They're waiting for him. You know, they're happy, and the UPS guy, you know, he's very happy because he gets out the door even quicker. So that's you know, kind of a win-win. But the rest of this sort of, it's, you know, this is appearance. It's, yeah, maybe it's important to the customer, but the primary thing is the quick, efficient service in my mind. So, homeworks. like I said, we've got a little bit here. A case study. I tried to put some of the information in here in terms of these are all, which edition are these? Well, anyway, I've come up with a separate chart for you, and in just a second I'll show you that will show you the different editions. So for this first exam, I know a few people had questions because people had different editions of the exam, so I went back through and labeled out the homework for the other ones. I don't want to do it right now, but I will provide kind of the completed examples to all of these different homework problems. So prior to the exam, you'll be good to go. In terms of the exam, yeah, we'll definitely have a review beforehand. You'll have the solutions to these homework problems. You will have 1 week to get the exam taken. Again, it's just a regular exam, so everything but the final will be done on Blackboard, and that Blackboard will be open for a week. When will this recording be posted? As soon as possible. Are we talking the recording? I'm looking at the notes here. Oh, I'm confused on when to turn in homework. It's supposed to be done anytime. No, yeah, that's the thing. If the homework confusion, you know, I realize people, once I turn out the examples, people could copy them down and just submit those right back to me. But you know, you really aren't gaining much then, and especially since I'm going to put them, make them as part of the test. If you do that, you know, your ability to retain that information is probably not going to be the same. But yeah, no, I'll stick with my original comment about the homework, that it just needs to be done prior to you taking the exam. So this recording, it was another question. Yeah, it'll be posted here pretty quick. The turnaround time with YouTube actually has been pretty quick, so I'll have this out tonight. What day is the exam going to be posted? Okay, so the exam is not next week. We've got, the exam will be posted for 1 week starting on the first day of the exam period. And yeah, it will be limited. Typically, it goes an hour for the exam. So again, that's why you would need to be fairly familiar with the homework. The multiple choice stuff you'll be able to scream through pretty quick. But if there's other problems on there, it may take you a bit longer. Yep. Okay, so did I get to all the questions here? Maybe, maybe not. Let me go back there and look. Okay, so we understand about the video comments and the homework assignments. The video comments are separate from the homework assignments. They're both listed in the assignments section. And where do we comment on the video? You go to the assignments section, and there you'll find a section for homework, and you'll find a thing for video comments. Anything else? In terms of lectures from last week, I don't know if that one, that was kind of pretty primitive conditions last week when I did that recording. If you guys were unable to hear that one, I don't want to punish you again, but I can make another recording of it if there was a problem. What date will the exam be posted? I'd have to look at the syllabus, and I'm not sure I can pull that up with this session going. But I'll put that in the announcements. Like I say, it'll be posted for the entire week after we do the view. Yeah, this homework thing's killing people. The homework is due before you take the exam. Okay, so as soon as you turn in your homework and it's the exam week, you're good to go. You can start on that. But no, you do not need to turn it in weekly. It needs to be done for each section. So there'll be a chunk of homework like this that's due for exam 1. There'll be a second chunk that's due for exam 2, and then there'll be a third chunk that's due before the before the final. Okay. All right. Well, this video in here is just horrid. Yeah, I look like whatever. We'll find better conditions next week, and look forward to talking to you then.